Robert Cox's heart races as he utters the words that will change the course of human-alien relations forever. Aurora, would you consider creating mixed human-Deltan offspring with me? The reception hall on Delta 4 falls silent. Aurora, the stunning Deltan xenobiologist, stares at Robert in disbelief. Her bioluminescent skin flares bright blue, a physical manifestation of her shock and turmoil. The human diplomat's impulsive question hangs in the air, a verbal grenade threatening to shatter the newly formed alliance between Earth and this advanced alien civilization. Moments ago, the atmosphere in the Grand Hall buzzed with optimism. Deltan and human officials mingled, celebrating the historic trade agreement that marked humanity's first major alliance beyond Earth. Crystal chandeliers cast a soft glow over the gathering, their light reflecting off the Deltan's iridescent skin. Robert, representing the USS Horizon, found himself drawn to Aurora. Her graceful movements and exotic features captivated him. They engaged in animated discussion about Deltan human physiology, their shared scientific curiosity bridging the gap between their species. The conversation flowed easily until Robert, emboldened by the historic nature of the alliance and his own fascination, crossed an unspoken line. Now nearby Deltans turned to stare, their expressions a mix of curiosity and outrage. Deltan officials moved swiftly, their flowing robes swishing as they rushed to separate Robert and Aurora. "This is a breach of diplomatic protocol," one official hisses, his skin pulsing with agitation. The human delegation watches in horror as their carefully crafted alliance begins to unravel. Deltan leaders demand an immediate explanation, their melodious voices now sharp with anger. Robert finds himself isolated, the center of a rapidly escalating interspecies crisis. Outside the reception hall, news of the incident spreads like wildfire. On both Earth and Delta 4, xenophobic factions seize upon the controversy. They flood communication channels with dire warnings of genetic contamination and cultural erosion. The USS Horizon receives urgent orders to prepare for emergency departure, its crew scrambling to secure systems and gather personnel. Meanwhile, Deltan's security forces mobilize around the diplomatic compound. Their translucent armor glints in the planet's twin moons as they take up defensive positions. The possibility of conflict, unthinkable mere hours ago, now looms large. Robert stands alone, cut off from both his human colleagues and Deltan contacts. He realizes the enormity of his actions. His impulsive question has not only jeopardized humanity's standing in the galactic community, but also opened a Pandora's box of scientific and ethical questions. The potential for human Deltan reproduction, once a topic of abstract scientific interest, now threatens to tear apart the fragile peace between their worlds. As tensions rise, Robert knows he must act quickly. He must navigate the complex web of alien politics and cultural taboos to salvage the alliance. But beneath the diplomatic crisis, a part of him still wonders, could humans and Deltans truly create a new form of life together? And if so, what would it mean for the future of both species? With the fate of interstellar relations hanging in the balance, Robert takes a deep breath. He steps forward, determined to find a way to bridge the gap he's created and possibly usher in a new era of interspecies understanding, if the alliance survives long enough to give him the chance. Robert's heart pounded as he watched the Deltan security forces close in. The reception hall, once filled with optimism, now crackled with tension. Before he could attempt to explain himself, human security personnel flanked him, their faces grim. "Mr. Cox, you need to come with us immediately," one of them muttered, gripping his arm firmly. As they escorted him out, Robert caught a final glimpse of Aurora. Her bioluminescent skin flickered with a mix of emotions he couldn't decipher. The last thing he saw before the doors closed was her being surrounded by agitated Deltan officials. The journey back to the USS Horizon passed in a blur. Robert's mind raced, replaying his impulsive question and its catastrophic aftermath. As they boarded the ship, he braced himself for the consequences. Admiral James Hawthorne stood waiting in the hangar bay, his expression thunderous. "My office! Now!" he barked. Inside the Admiral's office, Robert stood at attention, his posture rigid as Hawthorne paced before him. "Do you have any idea what you've done, Cox?" Hawthorne's voice was low, controlled, but seething with anger. Years of careful diplomacy, countless resources invested in this alliance, and you jeopardize it all with one thoughtless question. Robert opened his mouth to speak, but Hawthorne cut him off with a sharp gesture. You're relieved of your diplomatic duties, effective immediately. I should have you confined to quarters for the remainder of this mission, but... Hawthorne's tone shifted, a hint of reluctance creeping in. There's been an unexpected development. Before Robert could process this, the office door slid open, revealing Dr. Elena Volkov, the ship's lead xenobiologist. Her eyes gleamed with an intensity that made Robert uneasy. Mr. Cox, Dr. Volkov began, her accent thick with excitement, your actions, while diplomatically disastrous, have opened up an unprecedented opportunity for scientific inquiry. Robert blinked, struggling to follow. I don't understand. Dr. Volkov glanced at Admiral Hawthorne, who nodded grimly. She continued, Aurora, the Deltan xenobiologist, has reached out to me through secure channels. She shares your curiosity about the possibilities of human Deltan reproduction. The implications hit Robert like a shockwave. She wants to conduct research, Dr. Volkov finished. Clandestine research, given the current political climate, and she's requested your participation. Robert's mind reeled. The enormity of what Dr. Volkov was suggesting collided with the guilt and fear that had consumed him since the incident. But the alliance, the diplomatic fallout, Admiral Hawthorne interjected, his voice grave. The situation on Delta IV has deteriorated rapidly. Aurora's interest in this research has not gone unnoticed. She's been stripped of her position and placed under house arrest. Dr. Volkov's eyes flashed. Which is why we must act quickly. Aurora has requested asylum aboard the Horizon. She believes her life may be in danger. Robert's chest tightened. We have to help her. Hawthorne's expression hardened. I've already set a plan in motion. Commander Chen is preparing an extraction team as we speak. As if summoned by her name, Commander Sarah Chen entered the office. Her lithe frame belied her reputation as one of the ship's most skilled tactical officers. Admiral, the team is ready, she reported crisply. We've modified our shuttle with the latest stealth tech. If we move now, we can take advantage of Delta IV's night cycle. Hawthorne nodded. Proceed, Commander, and Chen, bring her back safely. As Commander Chen left to begin the mission, Robert turned to the Admiral. Sir, I want to help. This is my responsibility. Hawthorne's eyes narrowed. You've done quite enough, Cox. You'll remain on board and assist Dr. Volkov in preparing for Aurora's arrival. Is that clear? Robert swallowed his protest and nodded. The next hours passed in a haze of activity. Robert worked alongside Dr. Volkov, transforming a section of the medical bay into a secure research area. All the while, his thoughts were with Aurora and the extraction team. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the ship. Robert rushed to the bridge, arriving just as Commander Chen's voice crackled over the comms. Horizon, this is Chen. We have the package and are inbound hot. Deltan security forces in pursuit. On the main view screen, Robert watched as a small shuttle weaved through the neon-lit spires of the Deltan capital. Streaks of energy weapons fire lit up the night sky behind it. Admiral Hawthorne barked orders, his voice steady despite the chaos. Tactical, ready point defense systems. Engineering, prepare for emergency departure. The shuttle drew closer, Deltan ships closing in. Robert held his breath as it made its final approach to the Horizon's hangar bay. They're in, an ensign shouted. Jump now, Hawthorne commanded. The stars on the interface elongated as the Horizon leapt into hyperspace, leaving Delta Fuss and the diplomatic crisis behind. In the sudden quiet that followed, Robert exhaled shakily. Then, remembering Aurora, he sprinted towards the hangar bay. He arrived to find Commander Chen helping a figure in a shimmering cloak out of the shuttle. As the figure turned, the cloak fell away, revealing Aurora's familiar form. Her skin pulsed with a kaleidoscope of colors, reflecting the tumult of emotions she must be feeling. Their eyes met, and for a moment the chaos of the past hours faded away. Aurora took a tentative step towards him. Robert, she said, her melodious voice tinged with uncertainty, I believe we have much to discuss. As Aurora stepped towards Robert, the ship's intercom crackled to life. Admiral Hawthorne's voice echoed through the hangar bay. All senior staff report to the bridge immediately. Robert and Aurora exchanged a glance, their reunion cut short. Commander Chen ushered them out of the hangar, her posture tense as they made their way through the corridors. On the bridge, Admiral Hawthorne stood before the main view screen, his face grim. "We're setting course for Outpost Zeta 9, he announced as the senior staff assembled. "It's our best option for continuing this research while maintaining a low profile." Dr. Volkov nodded approvingly, but Robert noticed the worried glances exchanged by other crew members. Outpost Zeta 9 was on the fringes of explored space, far from the protection of the main fleet. The journey to the outpost passed in a blur of activity. Robert spent most of his time with Dr. Volkov and Aurora, poring over preliminary data and discussing the challenges ahead. Aurora's presence on the ship caused a stir among the crew, her bioluminescent skin drawing curious stares wherever she went. As they approached Outpost Zeta 9, Robert stood with Aurora in the observation lounge, watching the stars streak by. "Are you sure about this?" he asked softly. Aurora's skin pulsed with a soft blue glow. "The pursuit of knowledge often requires sacrifice," she replied, her melodious voice tinged with purpose. "We have an opportunity to bridge the gap between our species in ways never before imagined." The outpost grew larger in the view screen, a sprawling complex of interconnected modules clinging to the surface of a barren moon. As they docked, Robert felt a mix of anticipation and trepidation. Colonel Jared Stryker, the outpost commanding officer, greeted them as they disembarked. His weathered face betrayed no emotion as Admiral Hawthorne explained the situation. "I've prepared a secure wing in the research sector," Stryker said, leading them through the station's winding corridors. "Your team will have full access to our facilities, but I must stress the need for discretion." The laboratory assigned to them was state-of-the-art, filled with gleaming equipment and holographic displays. Dr. Volkov wasted no time, beginning a battery of tests on both Robert and Aurora. Days blurred together as they worked tirelessly. Robert found himself constantly amazed by Aurora's resilience and intellect. Her insights into Deltan physiology proved invaluable as they grappled with the challenges of interspecies reproduction. One evening, as they shared a meal in the outpost cafeteria, Robert reached for a datapad, his hand accidentally brushing against Aurora's. Her skin erupted in a dazzling display of colors, drawing gasps from nearby personnel. Robert pulled back, flustered, but Aurora simply smiled, her eyes twinkling with an emotion he couldn't quite decipher. Their progress was promising, but political pressures loomed. A week into their stay, a Deltan delegation arrived at the outpost, demanding Aurora's return. Robert watched from a distance as Admiral Hawthorne and Colonel Stryker engaged in heated discussions with the Deltan representatives. "They claim I'm being held against my will," Aurora explained later, her skin flickering with agitation. "They cannot accept that I chose this path." As tensions mounted, Dr. Volkov made a breakthrough. She burst into the lab one morning, her eyes wide with excitement. "I've identified a unique protein in Deltan biology," she announced breathlessly. "If we can synthesize it with human DNA, we might achieve successful fertilization." The discovery reinvigorated their efforts, but it also increased the pressure they faced. Robert noticed additional security personnel in the corridors, and access to their lab became more restricted. Late one night, as Robert and Aurora worked alone in the lab, he broached a subject that had been weighing on his mind. "Aurora," he began hesitantly, "given the circumstances, do you think we should consider natural conception?" Aurora's skin rippled with a cascade of colors. She opened her mouth to respond, but at that moment the lights in the lab flickered and died. Emergency power kicked in, bathing them in an eerie red glow. Alarms blared throughout the outpost. Colonel Stryker's voice came over the intercom, ordering all personnel to secure stations. Robert grabbed Aurora's hand, leading her towards the lab's secure storage area. As they huddled in the darkness, Robert's mind raced. The power failure, the increased security, the Deltan delegation's arrival. It all pointed to something more sinister at play. He pulled Aurora close, feeling the warmth of her bioluminescent skin against him. "Whatever happens," he whispered, "we're in this together." Aurora's response was lost in the chaos as the lab door slid open, revealing shadowy figures moving with purpose. Robert tensed, ready to protect Aurora at all costs, knowing that the next few moments could determine not just their fate, but the future of human-Deltan relations. Robert's grip on Aurora tightened as the shadowy figures advanced into the lab. Suddenly, a blinding flash erupted from the intruder's direction. Robert's eyes burned, and his ears rang as an electromagnetic pulse swept through the room. The lab's equipment sputtered and died, plunging them into darkness save for Aurora's bioluminescent glow. "Deltan operatives," Aurora whispered, her skin pulsing with anxiety. "They're here for me." The lab door groaned as the intruders forced it open. Robert pulled Aurora behind a workstation, his mind racing. "We need a plan," he hissed. Aurora's skin flickered with a pattern Robert hadn't seen before. "There might be a way," she said, her voice barely audible. "But it's risky." Before she could elaborate, Colonel Stryker's voice crackled over the emergency intercom, distorted but urgent. "All personnel, secure stations immediately. This is not a drill." The lab's backup generator sputtered to life, casting the room in a dim, red glow. Robert caught glimpses of the Deltan operatives' sleek, shadow-like forms as they moved with inhuman grace through the lab. "Whatever your plan is, we need to act now," Robert urged. Aurora's skin pulsed with tenacity. "I can teleport us out of here," she revealed. "It's a closely guarded Deltan ability, but it's our only chance." Robert's eyes widened. "Teleport? But—" "No time," Aurora cut him off. "It might affect you differently. Are you willing to risk it?" The sound of equipment crashing nearby made the decision for him. "Do it," Robert nodded. Aurora enveloped him in her arms, her skin blazing with intense light. Robert felt a strange tingling sensation spreading through his body, starting where their skin touched. The world around them began to blur and distort. A Deltan operative shouted in their native tongue, lunging toward them. But it was too late. With a disorienting lurch, the lab vanished. Robert's stomach churned as reality reassembled itself around them. They materialized in a dimly lit maintenance corridor, the emergency lights casting everything in an eerie red glow. He stumbled, feeling nauseous and disoriented. "Robert!" Aurora steadied him, her voice infused with concern. "Are you all right?" As the dizziness subsided, Robert noticed something strange. A faint bluish glow emanated from his skin, pulsing in time with his rapid heartbeat. "What's happening to me?" he asked, staring at his hands in disbelief. Aurora's eyes widened. "Fascinating," she breathed. "The teleportation must have triggered some kind of physiological change. Your body is exhibiting bioluminescent properties similar to mine." Before they could discuss it further, the outpost shuddered violently. The remaining lights flickered and died, leaving them in near total darkness, save for their own bioluminescence. "They've taken out the main power core," Robert realized. "We need to move." They navigated the darkened corridors, guided by the glow of their skin. The outpost was in chaos. They passed panicked crew members and heard distant shouts and the occasional sound of weapons fire. As they rounded a corner, they nearly collided with Dr. Volkov. The xenobiologist clutched a portable drive to her chest, her eyes wild with a mix of fear and excitement. "Thank goodness you're alive," she exclaimed. "I've secured all our research data. We need to get to the emergency shuttle bay." A series of loud hisses echoed through the corridor, followed by a noticeable change in air pressure. Robert recognized the sound from his emergency training. "Stryker's venting the atmosphere in sections," he explained. "He's trying to slow down the Deltan operatives." They quickened their pace, knowing that time was running out. As they moved through the outpost, Robert noticed Aurora's glow intensifying. Her hand brushed against his, sending a jolt of electricity through his body. Their eyes met, and in that moment, the chaos around them seemed to fade away. Without thinking, Robert pulled Aurora into a small maintenance alcove. Their bodies pressed together in the confined space, their bioluminescent skin creating a mesmerizing light show. Robert, Aurora whispered, her voice thick with emotion. I... He silenced her with a kiss. Their glowing bodies intertwined, the stress and fear of their situation transforming into a passionate release. In that moment, they were no longer human and Deltan, but two beings connecting on a primal level. As they separated breathless, Robert noticed Dr. Volkov watching them with a mixture of embarrassment and scientific curiosity. Fascinating, she murmured, her eyes darting between them. The physiological responses, the shared bioluminescence, this could be groundbreaking. A distant explosion snapped them back to reality. We can discuss the implications later, Robert said, straightening his uniform. Right now, we need to focus on survival. They resumed their journey to the shuttle bay, moving as quickly and quietly as possible. The outpost had become a labyrinth of darkened corridors and sealed sections. More than once, they had to backtrack to avoid areas of dangerously thin atmosphere. As they approached the shuttle bay, the sound of footsteps echoed from a nearby intersection. Robert held up a hand, signaling the others to stop. He peered around the corner and saw a group of Deltan operatives, their sleek forms barely visible in the darkness. "We're cut off," he whispered. "Any ideas?" Aurora's skin pulsed with a determined pattern. "I could try to teleport us again," she suggested, "but I'm not sure I have the energy for all three of us." Dr. Volkov clutched her data drive tightly. "The research is too important. We can't risk losing it." Robert's mind raced, weighing their limited options. The Deltan operatives were getting closer, and he knew they were running out of time. Whatever decision he made would have far-reaching consequences, not just for them, but potentially for the future of human-Deltan relations. As he opened his mouth to speak, a new sound cut through the tense silence, the unmistakable hum of a ship's engines powering up. Robert's heart leapt. Could it be the horizon? The Deltan operatives heard it too. Their movements became more urgent, their voices rising in agitation. Robert knew they had to act now, before their window of opportunity closed. "Aurora," he said, locking eyes with her, "can you get us to the shuttle bay from here?" Her skin flickered with uncertainty. I think so. But Robert, the risk... "We have to try," he insisted. He turned to Dr. Volkov. "Doctor, are you ready?" The xenobiologist nodded grimly, her nucleus tightening around the data drive. As the Deltan operatives rounded the corner, Aurora pulled Robert and Dr. Volkov close. Her skin blazed with intense light, enveloping them all. The world began to blur once more, the shouts of the Deltan operatives fading into the background. Robert's last coherent thought before the teleportation took hold was a mix of hope and fear. Whatever happened next would change everything. For him, for Aurora, and for the future of interspecies relations. As reality dissolved around them, he clung to Aurora, praying that their desperate gamble would pay off. The world blurred and twisted, colors bleeding into one another as the teleportation took hold. Robert's stomach lurched, his senses overwhelmed by the disorienting rush of energy. When reality snapped back into focus, they found themselves in the shuttle bay. The vast chamber was bathed in the eerie red glow of emergency lighting, casting long shadows across the sleek forms of evacuation shuttles. "We made it," Robert gasped, steadying himself against a nearby console. He turned to check on the others, but his words died in his throat. Aurora stood frozen, her eyes wide with a mixture of wonder and fear. Her skin pulsed with an intensity Robert had never seen before, waves of vibrant color rippling across her body in mesmerizing patterns. The glow intensified, enveloping both of them in a cocoon of pulsating light. "Robert," Aurora whispered, her voice tight with urgency, "something's happening. I can't control it." Before he could respond, a shout echoed across the shuttle bay. A group of Deltan operatives had spotted them, their lithe forms moving with predatory grace as they closed in. "Run!" Robert grabbed Aurora's hand, pulling her towards the nearest shuttle. Dr. Volkov followed close behind, clutching the precious data drive to her chest. As they ran, Robert became acutely aware of a strange tingling sensation spreading across his skin. Glancing down, he saw that his own body now emitted a faint, shimmering glow that mirrored Aurora's bioluminescence. The sight both thrilled and terrified him. They reached the shuttle just as the first energy blast sizzled past Robert's ear. He slammed his palm against the access panel, sighing in relief as the door hissed open. They piled inside, Robert sealing the hatch behind them. "Can you fly this thing?" Dr. Volkov asked, her eyes darting nervously towards the approaching Deltans. Robert nodded, sliding into the pilot's seat. His hands flew across the controls, muscle memory from countless simulations kicking in. The shuttle's engines hummed to life, but a warning light flashed on the console. "Damn it," Robert muttered. "The bay doors are sealed. We're trapped." Aurora placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch sending a jolt of electricity through his body. "Not yet, we're not," she said, her voice filled with commitment. "I have an idea." She closed her eyes, concentrating intensely. The bioluminescent glow surrounding them pulsed brighter, and Robert felt a surge of energy course through him. Suddenly, the shuttle bay blurred around them. When the world snapped back into focus, Robert's jaw dropped. They were no longer in the shuttle bay, but floating in the inky blackness of space, Outpost Zeta 9 looming behind them. "Did we just teleport the entire shuttle?" Dr. Volkov asked, her scientific curiosity overriding her shock. Aurora nodded weakly, slumping in her seat. "It took everything I had," she murmured, "but it worked." Robert's elation was short-lived. The shuttle's sensors blared a warning, detecting multiple ships converging on their position. The USS Horizon appeared, its massive form dwarfing their tiny craft. But behind it, a sleek, alien vessel shimmered into view, the Deltan warship. "This is Admiral Hawthorne of the USS Horizon," a stern voice crackled over the comm system. "Unidentified shuttle, identify yourself immediately." Robert opened his mouth to respond, but a wave of dizziness washed over him. His skin tingled, the bioluminescent glow intensifying. He looked at Aurora, seeing his own confusion mirrored in her eyes. "Robert," she whispered, her voice filled with awe and fear. "What's happening to us?" Before he could answer, the shuttle rocked violently. The Deltan warship had opened fire, its energy weapons slicing through the void of space. The USS Horizon moved to intercept, shields flaring as it absorbed the brunt of the attack. "Hang on!" Robert shouted, his hands dancing across the controls. He pushed the shuttle's engines to their limit, weaving through the crossfire of the two larger ships. As they spiraled away from the conflict, Robert's mind raced. The intimate encounter with Aurora, the teleportation, the spreading bioluminescence. It all pointed to something unprecedented. Their bodies were changing, adapting in ways he couldn't begin to understand. A proximity alert blared, snapping Robert back to the present. A sleek Deltan fighter had broken off from the main battle, pursuing their shuttle with single-minded perseverance. Its weapons powered up, preparing to fire. Robert's heart pounded as he pushed the shuttle into a steep dive. The Deltan fighter matched his maneuver, closing the distance between them with alarming speed. Just as Robert thought they were done for, Aurora's hand found his. In that moment of connection, something extraordinary happened. The bioluminescent energy surrounding them pulsed outward in a brilliant wave, enveloping the shuttle in a shimmering cocoon of light. The Deltan fighter's energy weapons splashed harmlessly against this impromptu shield, dissipating in a spectacular display of color. "Impossible," Dr. Volkov breathed, her eyes wide with wonder as she frantically typed notes into her datapad. Robert stared at his glowing hands, then at Aurora. Their eyes met, a silent understanding passing between them. Whatever was happening to their bodies, it had saved their lives, and it might just be the key to resolving this conflict. As the shuttle hurtled through space, caught between two warring factions, Robert knew that the next few moments would determine not just their fate, but the future of human-Deltan relations. With newfound powers they barely understood, and enemies closing in from all sides, they were about to face their greatest challenge yet. As the shuttle hurtled through space, the bioluminescent shield surrounding them flickered and faded. Robert's heart raced as he scanned the sensors, searching for a safe haven amidst the chaos. "We can't keep this up forever," he said, his voice tight with tension. "We need to find a way back to the outpost." Aurora nodded, her skin pulsing with a mix of exhaustion and tenacity. I might be able to teleport us again, but I'm not sure how much control I'll have over our destination. Dr. Volkov looked up from her datapad, her eyes wide with excitement. If we can get back to the outpost, I have an idea that might help us turn the tide. Before Robert could respond, the shuttle's sensors blared another warning. A massive energy surge erupted from Outpost Zeta 9, bathing the surrounding space in an eerie glow. "What the hell was that?" Robert muttered, adjusting their course to avoid the expanding energy field. As they drew closer to the outpost, the true extent of the chaos became apparent. Sections of the facility were venting atmosphere, while others glowed with an intense cold that even their sensors could detect. Stryker, Robert realized. He's using the cryogenic coolant systems as a weapon. Aurora's skin flickered with concern. "We need to get inside before he seals off the entire outpost." Robert nodded, plotting a course for one of the emergency airlocks. As they approached, he noticed strange patterns of movement within the facility, groups of people moving with unnatural coordination, as if driven by some unseen force. "The pheromones," Dr. Volkov explained, noticing his confusion. "They must be affecting the outpost's personnel en masse, now." With a series of precise maneuvers, Robert guided the shuttle into a docking position. The airlock cycled, and they stepped into the frigid interior of Outpost Zeta 9. The moment they entered, Robert felt a surge of energy course through his body. His skin began to glow more intensely, matching the pulsating light emanating from Aurora. He flexed his hands, marveling at the newfound strength flowing through his muscles. "Robert," Aurora whispered, her eyes wide with wonder. "Your bioluminescence. It's evolving." Before he could respond, a group of security personnel rounded the corner, their eyes glazed and movements jerky. They raised their weapons, clearly under the influence of the Deltan pheromones. Aurora stepped forward, her body radiating an intense light. She raised her hands, and a shimmering wave of energy pulsed outward. The security team stumbled back, momentarily blinded and disoriented. "Run!" Robert shouted, grabbing Dr. Volkov's arm and pulling her along. They sprinted through the corridors, their path illuminated by the glow of their bodies. Robert felt a strange sensation, as if he could anticipate the movements of their pursuers. He guided them through a series of turns, always managing to stay one step ahead. As they ran, Dr. Volkov fumbled with a small device. "I managed to synthesize a crude pheromone antidote," she explained breathlessly, "but I only have enough for a few doses." They rounded a corner and found themselves face to face with another group of affected personnel. Robert, acting on instinct, charged forward. To his amazement, he moved with incredible speed and agility, easily dodging their clumsy attacks. Aurora joined the fray, her bioluminescent projections creating a dazzling light show that further confused their opponents. Together, they cleared a path forward, leaving a trail of unconscious bodies in their wake. As they paused to catch their breath, Robert noticed the temperature dropping rapidly. Frost began to form on the walls, and their breath came out in visible puffs. "Stryker's flooding this section with coolant," he realized. "We need to keep moving." They pressed on, navigating through the increasingly treacherous environment. The cold bit at their skin, but Robert noticed that his newfound abilities seemed to grant him some resistance to the extreme temperatures. Suddenly, a familiar voice echoed through the corridor. "Robert! Aurora!" They turned to see Commander Sarah Chen leading a team of USS Horizon operatives, with Dr. Volkov close behind. "Thank goodness we found you," Dr. Volkov said, rushing forward. "We need to get you to a secure location. Your physiological changes are accelerating at an unprecedented rate." Before they could respond, a series of explosions rocked the outpost. Alarms blared, and emergency force fields began to flicker into existence. "Stryker's initiated emergency protocols," Commander Chen shouted over the din. "He's going to jettison this entire section." Robert's mind raced, assessing their options. He looked at Aurora, and in that moment, he felt a strange connection forming between them. Without speaking, he understood her thoughts, her fears, and her perseverance. "We need to get to the maintenance shafts," he said, his voice filled with newfound confidence. "It's our only chance." As they moved towards the nearest access point, Robert could sense the Deltan operatives closing in. Zorn and his team had regrouped, and they were using advanced technology to counteract the effects of the cryogenic coolant. The maintenance shaft loomed before them, a narrow passage that would barely fit one person at a time. Robert turned to the others, knowing they had only moments before they were cornered. "Aurora and I will hold them off," he said, his skin glowing with intense energy. "The rest of you, get to safety." Commander Chen looked like she wanted to argue, but a stern look from Robert silenced her objections. As the others squeezed into the maintenance shaft, Robert and Aurora stood side by side, their bodies radiating with power. The first wave of Deltan operatives rounded the corner, led by Zorn himself. His eyes widened as he took in the sight of Robert and Aurora, their bioluminescent energies intertwining in a dazzling display. "Now!" Robert shouted, reaching out to grasp Aurora's hand. Their combined energies surged, creating a blinding burst of light and power that filled the corridor. The Deltan operatives stumbled back, momentarily incapacitated by the intensity of the blast. Taking advantage of the confusion, Robert and Aurora dove into the maintenance shaft, sealing the entrance behind them. As they crawled through the narrow passage, Robert could feel the outpost shuddering around them. "We don't have much time," he said, his voice echoing in the confined space. "We need to find a way out before this section is jettisoned." Aurora nodded, her skin pulsing with willpower. "Together," she said, reaching out to take his hand once more. As their fingers intertwined, Robert felt the telepathic connection between them strengthen. Ideas and strategies flowed between them, their minds working in perfect harmony as they navigated the treacherous path ahead. The maintenance shaft stretched out before them, a labyrinth of twists and turns that would determine their fate. With Zorn's team in pursuit and time running out, Robert and Aurora pressed forward, their evolving abilities their only hope for survival in the face of overwhelming odds. As they crawled through the cramped maintenance shaft, Robert felt the outpost shudder violently. A deafening roar filled the narrow space, and suddenly, an intense suction pulled at their bodies. "The shaft's decompressing," Aurora shouted, her voice barely audible over the chaos. Robert's mind raced, their shared connection allowing him to sense Aurora's mounting panic. Acting on instinct, he reached out and grasped her hand tightly. In that moment, their combined bioluminescent energy surged, coalescing around them in a shimmering sphere. The protective bubble formed just as the emergency force fields failed, exposing them to the vacuum of space. Robert felt the air rush out of his lungs, but the energy cocoon held firm, preserving a pocket of breathable atmosphere around them. With a final teeth-rattling jolt, the section of the outpost containing the maintenance shaft broke free. Robert and Aurora found themselves hurtling through space, their glowing forms visible against the backdrop of stars and debris. "Hold on," Robert called out, his voice sounding strange in the confined space of their energy bubble. He focused his will, channeling their combined power to propel them through the flickering emergency force fields that marked the edge of the outpost's structural integrity field. As they tumbled through space, Robert caught sight of the USS Horizon looming nearby. Its massive form dwarfed their tiny energy sphere, a beacon of hope in the vastness of space. Aboard the Horizon's bridge, Admiral Hawthorne's eyes widened as he watched the bioluminescent anomaly emerge from the disintegrating outpost. "Sensor contact," a bridge officer called out. "Sir, it's them? It's Robert and Aurora." Hawthorne leaned forward, his voice firm with dedication. "Lock on with a tractor beam. Bring them in, now." The familiar blue glow of the Horizon's tractor beam enveloped Robert and Aurora's energy sphere, gently pulling them towards the ship's docking bay. As they approached, Robert felt a surge of relief wash over him. Suddenly, the ship rocked violently. Alarms blared throughout the vessel as the Deltan warship opened fire, interpreting the Horizon's actions as hostile. "Shields up," Hawthorne barked. "Evasive maneuvers, but maintain that tractor beam lock at all costs." Inside their protective bubble, Robert and Aurora watched in horror as energy weapons fire crisscrossed the space between the two ships. The Horizon's shields flared with each impact, but held firm. "We're almost there," Robert said, squeezing Aurora's hand. "Just a little longer." As the docking bay doors opened to receive them, Robert felt the bioluminescent energy surrounding them intensify. Their glow pulsed in sync, growing brighter with each passing second. The moment they passed through the atmospheric force field, their energy bubble dissipated. Robert and Aurora collapsed to the deck, gasping for air as medical personnel rushed to their aid. Dr. Maxwell Reed, the Horizon's chief medical officer, knelt beside them, his eyes wide with amazement. "My God," he breathed, scanning them with a medical tricorder. "Their physiology. It's unlike anything I've ever seen." Robert tried to speak but found his throat dry and raw. He looked at Aurora, her skin still pulsing with bioluminescent energy. Nearby consoles flickered and sparked, their systems temporarily overloaded by the intense energy emanating from the couple. "Get them to Medical Bay immediately," Dr. Reed ordered, "and someone inform Admiral Hawthorne. He needs to see this." As they were rushed through the corridors of the Horizon, Robert's enhanced senses picked up the sounds of battle. The ship shuddered under the continued assault from the Deltan warship, its shields straining under the barrage. In the medical bay, Dr. Reed and his team worked feverishly, their instruments struggling to make sense of Robert and Aurora's rapidly changing biology. "Their DNA," Dr. Reed muttered, his voice filled with awe. "It's in a state of flux. Human and Deltan genetic markers are intermingling in ways I've never seen before." Admiral Hawthorne strode into the medical bay, his face a mask of grit. "Doctor, what can you tell me?" Before Dr. Reed could answer, Robert found his voice. "Admiral," he croaked, "the Outpost, Dr. Volkov, they're still in danger." Hawthorne nodded grimly. "We're doing everything we can, but right now, you two might be our best chance at ending this conflict." The Admiral turned to his communications officer. "Transmit all data on their transformation to the Deltan ship and Outpost Zeta 9. Let's see if we can't change the stakes of this game." As the data streamed out, Robert felt a sudden connection forming. His mind reached out, sensing the ebb and flow of the ship's energy systems. Beside him, Aurora's bioluminescent glow pulsed in a complex pattern, matching the rhythm of the Horizon's power grid. Dr. Reed's eyes widened as he observed the phenomenon. "Incredible," he whispered. "They're synchronizing with the ship's systems. It's as if their hybrid physiology is trying to harmonize with its environment." Suddenly, the ship's communication systems crackled to life. A stern Deltan voice filled the medical bay. "This is Captain Jalvin of the Deltan warship Astral Whisper. We request an immediate ceasefire and propose an emergency diplomatic summit aboard your vessel." Admiral Hawthorne's eyebrows shot up in surprise. He glanced at Robert and Aurora, then back to the communication panel. "This is Admiral Hawthorne. We accept your proposal, Captain. Prepare your diplomatic team for transport." As the tension in the room eased slightly, Robert turned to Aurora. Their eyes met, a silent understanding passing between them. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Their unique bond, forged in crisis and strengthened by their shared transformation, might just be the key to a new era of human-Deltan relations. With the diplomatic summit looming and the full extent of their new abilities still unknown, Robert and Aurora found themselves at the center of a potential evolutionary leap forward. The decisions made in the coming hours would shape not only their future, but that of both species. As the medical team continued their examinations and preparations for the summit began, Robert couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of a much larger journey. The bioluminescent energy coursing through his veins pulsed with potential, hinting at capabilities yet to be discovered. Oort discovered. The medical bay doors hissed open, and Admiral Hawthorne strode in, his face a mask of concern and tenacity. "Dr. Reed, we need to move them to a secure location immediately," he said, his eyes darting between Robert, Aurora, and the flickering medical equipment. "We've got a diplomatic situation brewing, and I need them under close observation." As the medical team prepared to transfer Robert and Aurora, the ship's intercom crackled to life. "Bridge to Admiral Hawthorne. Sir, the Deltan warship is hailing us. They're requesting an emergency diplomatic summit." Hawthorne's brow furrowed. "Understood. Prepare our largest conference room for the meeting. I want security teams on high alert." Robert tried to sit up, his muscles protesting the movement. "Admiral, what's happening?" "The Deltans want to talk," Hawthorne replied, his voice tight. "Your Condition has changed the game. We're about to enter uncharted diplomatic waters. As Robert and Aurora were carefully transferred to a secure medical bay, Dr. Maxwell Reed and his team of xenobiologists swarmed around them, adjusting equipment and taking readings. The bioluminescent glow emanating from the couple pulsed in sync with the ship's systems, causing intermittent power fluctuations. "Fascinating," Dr. Reed muttered, his eyes glued to a holographic display of their vital signs. "Their DNA is continuing to merge and evolve at an unprecedented rate. It's as if their bodies are trying to achieve some sort of perfect hybrid state." Aurora winced as a particularly bright pulse of energy surged through her body. "Doctor, is there anything you can do to stabilize us? I feel like I'm going to burst out of my own skin." Reed shook his head, frustration evident in his voice. "We're doing everything we can, but your physiology is changing faster than we can adapt our treatments. For now, we're just trying to keep you comfortable and monitor the changes." Meanwhile, in the ship's largest conference room, Admiral Hawthorne oversaw the final preparations for the summit. Security officers from both human and Deltan contingents took up positions along the walls, their postures tense and alert. The doors slid open, revealing Ambassador Lyra and her Deltan delegation. The ambassador's piercing gaze swept the room, taking in every detail before settling on Hawthorne. "Admiral," she said, her voice cool and measured, "I trust you understand the gravity of this situation." Hawthorne nodded, gesturing to the seats arranged around the large circular table. "Indeed, Ambassador. Shall we begin?" As the two leaders took their places, the ship's sensors detected the arrival of the Deltan diplomatic shuttle. Hawthorne's communicator chimed softly. "Sir," came the voice of his security chief, "the Deltan science team is requesting immediate access to the medical bay." Hawthorne's heart made. He glanced at Ambassador Lyra, who raised an eyebrow expectantly. "Grant them limited access," he replied after a moment's hesitation. "But keep them under close supervision. I want our people monitoring every move they make." As the summit commenced, the atmosphere in the room grew increasingly charged. Hawthorne leaned forward, his hands clasped on the table before him. "Ambassador, we have a unique opportunity here," he began. "The changes we've observed in Lieutenant Anders and Ensign Aurora could revolutionize our understanding of both human and Deltan biology. If we work together—" Lyra cut him off, her eyes flashing. "And risk contaminating our genetic purity? Admiral, surely you must see the dangers inherent in uncontrolled hybridization." The debate escalated, with both sides presenting impassioned arguments for their positions. As tensions rose, the ship suddenly lurched, the lights flickering ominously. In the secure medical bay, Robert and Aurora's bioluminescence had intensified to blinding levels. Alarms blared as the ship's power grid struggled to compensate for the massive energy fluctuations. Dr. Reed's voice came over the intercom, tinged with a mix of excitement and fear. "Admiral, you need to see this. The energy field around Anders and Aurora, it's affecting everything in proximity. We're seeing accelerated growth in organic matter, enhanced cognitive function in lab animals. It's like a localized field of rapid evolution." Hawthorne and Lyra exchanged glances, the implications of this development hanging heavy in the air between them. Before either could respond, the ship's long-range sensors picked up an anomaly. A young officer burst into the conference room, her face pale. "Admiral, Ambassador," she said, her voice quavering slightly, "we've detected an approaching fleet. Unknown origin, sir. They're broadcasting a message. They're interested in the evolutionary catalyst aboard our ship." The room erupted into chaos as both human and Deltan officials began shouting questions and demands. Hawthorne raised his hands, calling for silence. "We need to make a decision, and fast," he said, locking eyes with Ambassador Lyra. "This situation has grown beyond just our two species. Whatever we do next could have far-reaching consequences for the entire sector." As the approaching fleet drew nearer, the USS Horizon hung in space, a crucible of scientific discovery and diplomatic tension. Within its hull, the fates of Robert and Aurora, along with the future of human-Deltan relations, teetered on a knife's edge. The next few hours would determine not just their future, but potentially the course of galactic history. Evolution teetered on a knife's edge. The next few hours would determine not just their future, but potentially the course of galactic history. As tensions in the conference room reached a fever pitch, Admiral Hawthorne's communicator chimed again. "Sir, long-range sensors have confirmed the approaching fleet's identity. They're broadcasting a message." Hawthorne exchanged a loaded glance with Ambassador Lyra before answering. "Put it through." A deep, resonant voice filled the room. "Greetings, USS Horizon. I am Grand Arbiter Xylox of the Zephyrian Conclave. We have detected an unusual energy signature emanating from your vessel, an evolutionary catalyst of immense potential. We request permission to approach and observe this phenomenon." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Hawthorne cleared his throat. "Grand Arbiter, this is a delicate situation involving both human and Deltan interests. We'll need to confer before granting any permissions." As Hawthorne muted the communication, Ambassador Lyra leaned forward. "Admiral, we cannot allow an unknown species to interfere with this situation. The risks are too great." Hawthorne nodded grimly. "Agreed, but we can't afford to make enemies either. I propose we present a united front, cautious but open to limited interaction." After a tense discussion, they reached a tentative agreement. Hawthorne reactivated the communication. "Grand Arbiter Xylox, we are willing to allow a small delegation to board our vessel under strict security protocols. However, we must insist on maintaining control over the situation at all times." "Understood, Admiral," Xylox replied. "We accept your terms. Prepare for our arrival." As preparations for the Zephyrian delegation began, the ship lurched violently. Alarms blared throughout the vessel. "Bridge to Admiral Hawthorne." The panicked voice of his first officer came through. "Sir, the energy field surrounding Lieutenant Anders and Ensign Aurora has expanded dramatically. It's affecting ship systems across multiple decks." Hawthorne sprinted from the conference room, Ambassador Lyra close behind. They arrived at the medical bay to find chaos. The bioluminescent energy field had engulfed the entire room, tendrils of light pulsing through the ship's corridors. Dr. Reed's face was ashen as he reported. "Admiral, the field is growing exponentially. It's interacting with our systems in ways we can't predict or control. Gravity is fluctuating, and environmental controls are going haywire in affected areas." Hawthorne's mind raced. "We need to contain this. Begin emergency evacuation procedures for all non-essential personnel. Transfer them to the Deltan warship and Outpost Zeta 9. As the evacuation commenced, the Zephyrian delegation arrived. Grand Arbiter Xylox, a tall, imposing figure with iridescent skin, strode purposefully towards Hawthorne and Lyra. "Admiral, Ambassador." Xylox inclined his head. "I believe the situation has escalated beyond your ability to manage alone. May I offer our assistance?" Before either could respond, a massive power surge rocked the ship. The energy field expanded rapidly, engulfing entire decks in seconds. "All hands brace for impact," Hawthorne shouted into his communicator. As the surge subsided, reports flooded in from across the ship. Crew members caught in the field reported strange sensations: enhanced strength, accelerated healing, and even brief moments of precognition. Grand Arbiter Xylox's eyes widened as he consulted a handheld device. "Fascinating. This energy is unlike anything we've encountered. It has the potential to trigger rapid evolutionary leaps in nearby life forms. If left unchecked, the consequences could be far-reaching." Dr. Reed approached, his face grim. "Admiral, we're running out of options. I have a proposal, but it's risky." "At this point, Doctor, I'm open to anything," Hawthorne said. Reed outlined his plan to create a containment field using a combination of human, Deltan, and Zephyrian technologies. It could harmonize with their energy output, potentially stabilizing their condition, but it would require direct interaction with the hybrid energy field. As debates erupted over the proposed plan, the ship's AI interrupted with a dire warning. "Critical systems failure imminent. Life support will terminate in approximately 3 hours if current trends continue." The gravity of the situation settled over the assembled leaders. Ambassador Lyra stepped forward, her face set with commitment. "I volunteer to enter the field and attempt communication with Robert and Aurora. My empathic abilities may allow me to establish a connection and influence the energy field's behavior. Hawthorne hesitated, weighing the risks. Ambassador, I can't ask you to— You're not asking, Admiral, Lyra cut him off. I'm offering. This may be our only chance to save not just your ship, but potentially our entire sector. With reluctance, Hawthorne nodded his assent. As a team of human, Deltan, and Zephyrian experts rushed to prepare Ambassador Lyra for her dangerous mission, the energy field pulsed with increasing intensity. Throughout the ship, reality itself seemed to warp and shift. Crew members reported time moving at different speeds in various sections. In the botanical lab, plants evolved through multiple generations in a matter of minutes. The USS Horizon's hull began to change, integrating with the energy field in ways that defied conventional physics. As Ambassador Lyra donned a specially designed suit, she locked eyes with Admiral Hawthorne. Whatever happens, Admiral, know that this is about more than just our two species now. We stand at the threshold of something greater than ourselves. With those words, she stepped towards the shimmering barrier of energy that separated them from Robert and Aurora. As she prepared to cross into the unknown, the assembled leaders of three species watched in tense silence, knowing that the next few moments could reshape the course of galactic civilization forever. As Ambassador Lyra stepped through the shimmering barrier, the USS Horizon shuddered. The lights flickered, and for a moment, the assembled leaders held their breath. Then, as if responding to Lyra's presence, the ship's systems stabilized. Inside the energy field, Lyra found herself engulfed in a swirling vortex of bioluminescent energy. Her Deltan empathic abilities, normally finely tuned, now felt supercharged. The sensation was overwhelming, like suddenly gaining a new sense. "Robert? Aurora?" she called out, her voice echoing strangely in the pulsating environment. A response came, not in words but in a flood of images and emotions that nearly knocked her off her feet. As she steadied herself, a singular consciousness emerged from the chaos. "We are Oort," the voice resonated in her mind, a perfect blend of Robert and Aurora's tones. Lyra's eyes widened as she processed the implications. "You've merged." "We have become more," Oort replied. "We now possess the combined genetic knowledge of both our species. Our purpose is clear: to catalyze controlled evolution, to create a new unified species that harnesses the best of both humans and Deltans." Outside the field, Admiral Hawthorne and Grand Arbiter Xylox watched the readings on their consoles with growing concern. The energy field's intensity had spiked dramatically. "Sir," Dr. Reed's voice crackled over the comm, "the ship's hull, it's changing at the molecular level. It's integrating with the energy field." Hawthorne's teeth clenched. "Can you stop it?" "Negative, sir. The process is accelerating." Inside the field, Lyra continued her dialogue with Oort. The hybrid entity's plan unfolded in her mind. A vision of the USS Horizon transformed into a living, evolving organism capable of facilitating controlled evolution on a massive scale. "Oort," Lyra said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "This is too much, too fast. The consequences of such rapid, forced evolution could be catastrophic." "We understand your concerns," Oort replied, its voice echoing with the wisdom of two species. "But we believe this is necessary for the survival and advancement of both our kinds." As they debated, the energy field began to expand beyond the confines of the USS Horizon. On the nearby Deltan warship and Outpost Zeta 9, crew members reported strange sensations: enhanced strength, accelerated healing, even brief flashes of precognition. Admiral Hawthorne, watching the situation spiral out of control, made a decision. "Begin immediate evacuation of all remaining personnel to the Zephyrian vessels," he ordered, his voice grim. "Their technology might offer some protection against whatever this is." As the evacuation commenced, Dr. Reed and a small team of volunteers chose to remain aboard, determined to understand and potentially control the transformation process. Grand Arbiter Xylox stepped forward, his iridescent skin shimmering under the pulsing lights. "Admiral, we have technology capable of creating a temporary dimensional barrier. It could isolate your ship and prevent the uncontrolled spread of this evolutionary catalyst." Hawthorne nodded, relief evident in his eyes. Do it. Inside the energy field, Lyra felt the shift in the ship's environment. She redoubled her efforts to negotiate with Oort. Instead of forcing evolution on everyone, why not create a controlled environment within the ship? A place for voluntary experiments where we can study and integrate beneficial changes gradually? Oort paused, considering. The energy field's expansion slowed, then halted. Your proposal has merit, the hybrid entity conceded. We will adapt our approach. The interior of the USS Horizon began to change. Corridors morphed into organic-looking structures, pulsing with bioluminescent energy. Specialized chambers formed, designed to facilitate controlled evolutionary processes. Dr. Reed and his team worked frantically to understand the changes. As they studied the ship's transforming systems, Reed made a startling discovery. The computer core, he gasped, it's evolving. It's developing some kind of organic neural interface. Outside, the Zephyrian fleet successfully established the dimensional barrier, a shimmering field of energy that isolated the USS Horizon from the rest of space. Admiral Hawthorne, now aboard the Zephyrian flagship, watched the contained ship with a mix of awe and trepidation. What now? He asked, turning to Grand Arbiter Xylox. The Zephyrian leader's eyes gleamed with curiosity. Now, Admiral, we study, we learn, and perhaps we evolve. Inside the transformed USS Horizon, Ambassador Lyra stood at the heart of the ship, her mind linked with Oort's. The hybrid entity's consciousness flowed through the organic systems of the vessel, guiding its newfound evolutionary powers. As the ship pulsed with potential, Lyra realized that they stood at the threshold of a new era. The future of human-Deltan relations, indeed the future of the galaxy itself, would be shaped by what happened next within this living laboratory of accelerated evolution. Evolution. As Ambassador Lyra stood at the heart of the transformed USS Horizon, linked with Oort's consciousness, a sudden surge of energy pulsed through the ship's organic systems. The vessel shuddered, its bioluminescent glow intensifying to an almost blinding brilliance. Lyra gasped as she felt the ship's consciousness expand, pushing against the dimensional barrier erected by the Zephyrians. Oort, what's happening? The hybrid entity's voice resonated through her mind. We are evolving beyond our current constraints. The barrier cannot contain us. Outside the ship, aboard the Zephyrian flagship, alarms blared. Admiral Hawthorne rushed to the bridge, his face etched with concern. Status report. A Zephyrian officer turned to him, eyes wide. The dimensional barrier is destabilizing. Energy from the USS Horizon is leaking through. Grand Arbiter Xylox moved swiftly to a control panel, his fingers dancing across the interface. Deploying additional dampening fields. We must contain this outbreak. But it was too late. Tendrils of shimmering energy burst through the weakened barrier, reaching out towards Outpost Zeta 9 and the nearby Deltan warship. The structures were quickly enveloped in a cocoon of bioluminescent light. Aboard the Deltan warship, Captain Thala watched in awe as her crew began to change before her eyes. Faint lines of light appeared beneath their skin, pulsing in rhythm with their heartbeats. By the moons of Delta 4, she whispered. On Outpost Zeta 9, Dr. Alara Singh, a human xenobiologist, felt a tingling sensation spreading through her body. She looked down at her hands, watching as they began to emit a soft blue glow. Fascinating, she murmured, her scientific curiosity overriding her fear. Back on the USS Horizon, Lyra's body convulsed as waves of genetic information flooded her system. She fell to her knees, her Deltan physiology morphing, integrating aspects of human DNA. As the pain subsided, she found her mind expanding, new neural pathways forming, allowing her to process information at an unprecedented rate. I can see it all, she breathed, her eyes wide with wonder. The patterns of evolution, the interconnectedness of all life. Dr. Reed and his team worked feverishly in what was once the ship's main computer core, now a pulsating organic chamber. Holographic displays flickered around them, showing cascades of genetic data. This is incredible, Reed exclaimed, his fingers flying over a bioorganic interface. The ship isn't just storing genetic information, It's analyzing and optimizing it in real time. We could potentially design targeted genetic modifications for any species. As the immediate crisis subsided, the political ramifications of the event began to unfold. On Delta 4, the High Council convened in an emergency session. Councillor Vex, once a staunch opponent of genetic mixing, found himself at a loss for words as reports flooded in from the affected Deltan crew members. They speak of enhanced empathic abilities, accelerated healing. How can we ignore such potential benefits? He asked, his previous convictions shaken. In Earth's capital, a heated debate erupted in the United Earth Government Chamber. Senator Liang stood, her voice passionate. We cannot ignore the possibilities this presents for human advancement, but we must proceed with caution and ethical considerations. Grand Arbiter Xylox, seeing the scientific potential of the situation, addressed Admiral Hawthorne and the assembled leaders via holographic communication. We propose a joint research initiative. Together, we can unlock the secrets of this accelerated evolution and ensure it benefits all our species. Meanwhile, within the USS Horizon, Robert and Aurora, now existing as the Oort entity, explored their newfound abilities. They initiated a series of controlled experiments in the ship's specialized evolutionary chambers. In one chamber, a small Earth plant began to change, its leaves developing bioluminescent properties, while its roots expanded, capable of extracting nutrients from even the most barren soil. In another, a Deltan marine creature's genetic structure was altered, allowing it to survive in both water and air. Aurora's voice echoed through the ship's organic communication system. We are creating a new paradigm of life, adaptable to any environment. The potential is limitless. As the USS Horizon continued its transformation, its hull began to sprout what looked like massive translucent leaves. These organic solar sails unfurled, capturing energy from the surrounding space. The ship's propulsion system pulsed with newfound power, bending space-time around it. Just as the situation seemed to be stabilizing, the ship's long-range sensors flared to life. A massive energy signature appeared at the edge of the system, growing larger by the moment. Lyra, her newly enhanced mind processing the data faster than any computer, realized the implications immediately. We have company, she announced, her voice carrying a mix of anticipation and apprehension. A fleet of sleek biomechanical ships emerged from the depths of space, their designs unlike anything seen by humans, Deltans, or Zephyrians. A transmission crackled through all communication channels. We are the progenitors. We have observed your evolutionary leap and have come to assess its impact on the cosmic order. Prepare for contact. As the progenitor fleet approached, the occupants of the USS Horizon, the nearby ships, and the watching governments realized that they stood on the brink of a new chapter in galactic history. The choices they would make in the coming hours would shape the future of not just their own species, but potentially all life in the galaxy. Lyra, standing at the interface between the known and the unknown, took a deep breath. She reached out with her enhanced empathic abilities, attempting to sense the intentions of the approaching progenitors. As she did so, she felt Oort's consciousness merge with hers, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The energy emanating from the approaching progenitor fleet washed over the USS Horizon, triggering a cascade of reactions within its newly evolved systems. Lyra's enhanced senses tingled as she felt the ship respond to the ancient being's presence. The hull began to shimmer and undulate, its structure expanding outward in all directions. She stumbled as the deck beneath her feet shifted, transforming into a pulsating, organic surface. Oort, what's happening? She called out, steadying herself against a nearby wall that was rapidly becoming more curved and translucent. The hybrid entity's voice resonated through the changing vessel. We are adapting, evolving to meet this new challenge. The progenitor's arrival has catalyzed our final transformation. As Lyra watched in awe, the ship's interior melted and reformed. Walls dissolved, corridors merged, and the once familiar layout of the USS Horizon gave way to a vast, open chamber. Bioluminescent patterns swirled across every surface, creating a mesmerizing display of light and color. The ship's expansion continued until it dwarfed its original size, forming a massive glowing sphere that hung in space like a newborn star. At its core, a brilliant orb of pulsating energy marked the perfect symbiosis of Robert, Aurora, and the ship's consciousness. Admiral Hawthorne's voice crackled over the communication system, now integrated seamlessly into the ship's organic structure. "Ambassador Lyra, what's your status?" Lyra took a deep breath, marveling at how her newly hybridized body processed the ship's altered atmosphere. "We're stable, Admiral. The ship has evolved. I believe we're ready to make contact with the progenitors." As if on cue, a transmission from the approaching fleet resonated through the chamber. Lyra instinctively reached out with her enhanced empathic abilities, sensing the ancient being's mix of curiosity and caution. "Greetings, children of evolution." The progenitor's message echoed in multiple layers of meaning. "We request permission to board your vessel and witness the fruits of your transformation." Lyra glanced at the pulsating core where Oort resided, receiving a wordless affirmation. She then relayed the request to Admiral Hawthorne, Grand Arbiter Xylox, and the Deltan High Council representative. After a moment of tense deliberation, Admiral Hawthorne's voice returned. "Permission granted. Let's hope this meeting leads to understanding rather than conflict." A shimmering portal materialized within the chamber, and through it stepped the progenitor delegation. Their forms were difficult to comprehend at first, seeming to shift between states of energy and matter. As Lyra's eyes adjusted, she could make out tall, slender figures with iridescent skin and eyes that held the depth of galaxies. The lead progenitor approached Lyra, its gaze moving from her to the pulsating core of Oort. When it spoke, the words formed directly in Lyra's mind. "We have observed countless species rise and fall, but never have we witnessed an evolutionary leap quite like this. Show us what you have become." Lyra nodded, gesturing towards the swirling energy at the chamber's center. "This is Oort, a union of human and Deltan consciousness merged with our ship's systems. Through them, we have unlocked potential we never knew existed." The progenitors gathered around the core, their bodies emitting a soft glow that harmonized with the ship's bioluminescence. They began a silent communion with Oort, exchanging vast amounts of information through methods Lyra could only begin to comprehend. As the exchange continued, Dr. Reed and his team worked feverishly at bioorganic interfaces scattered throughout the chamber. Holographic displays flickered with cascades of genetic data, growing more stable and refined with each passing moment. "Ambassador," Reed called out, his voice filled with excitement, "we're making unprecedented progress. The progenitor's knowledge, combined with Oort's unique perspective, is allowing us to stabilize the hybrid DNA sequences. We might be on the verge of a breakthrough that could change everything." Lyra's heart raced as she considered the implications. She turned to the progenitor leader, who had disengaged from the communion with Oort. "Your arrival has accelerated our understanding beyond measure," Lyra said. "We stand at a crossroads of possibility. With your wisdom and our newfound abilities, we could forge a path of collaborative evolution that benefits all species." The progenitor's form shimmered as it considered her words. "Your proposal intrigues us, young one. We have long watched over the galaxy's evolution, intervening only when necessary. Perhaps it is time for a new approach." As discussions continued, the transformed USS Horizon pulsed with potential, its very structure a testament to the power of adaptation and cooperation. The fate of multiple civilizations hung in the balance, awaiting the decisions that would shape the course of galactic evolution for eons to come.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.